Welcome to episode number 2 of the WWSD project. This week we'll be installing the AJE Colt 65 suspension kit along with a Fox body power rack, an SVE bump steer, and an SN95 hub and spindle. Our video will focus on the installation of the AJE Colt suspension kit. As you can see here, the first part of this project was removing the shock tower bracing along with the strut rod braces and then the center caps at the top of the shock towers. You can see here where we drilled out the spot welds and then used an air chisel to pry away the parts. Of course, doing that can cause some damage and we had to clean that up later. As you can see here, there's some extra bracing that the GT500s have on the opposite side of the shock tower. We had to cut through that with a hole saw to get to the bolts that we would be using to mount the cradle.
Alright, what we're going to do is explain how we found center and center of holes. Number one, this is the picture that AJE sends you. Here's the other picture. Tell me how that's going to help you. Alright, what we did is took a steel rule that has 100 thousandths on it, measured from center. To find our center, we measure from the outside of the slotted hole to the outside of the slotted hole. And this comes to 8 inches 500 thousandths. So if you divide that by 2, you got 4 inches 250 thousandths, or 4 1/4 inches. Then you make your mark at 4 1/4, and you roll your mark all the way over the edge of the tape, so that when you put it up there and you have your alignment mark on the inside of the frame, you can see it. Then you measure the width of the slotted hole, which is 500,000, or it's actually 600 thousandths. So half of that would be 300 thousandths. And you put a mark there because that's your center line side to side. And then you check it this way, it's 1 inch 300 thousandths. So that's going to give you a 650 thousandth center line. and then make your mark, and then take you any kind of awl or a punch or a scribe and put it through there. That way when you put it up and you center it and you have everything where you want it, you have these marks lined up on the inside of the frame. You can take your center punch and punch it here, or you can just take your 1/8 inch drill bit and run it through there on all 4 holes, and you're ready to go. That gives you your center lines, and that tells you where you need to start drilling.
Back up. All right, go ahead.
One of the things that tells you in the directions is to make sure that you don't drop your sleeve inside the frame rail. What I found is you can take an O-ring, and I'll give you the size in a minute, slide it over the bolt and force the sleeve over it, and that holds it in the frame rail right, and it won't fall through. The O-ring I'm using is a 3/8 by 9/16 by 3/32. It's just a generic O-ring kit from Harbor Freight or O'Reilly's. Slide it, put it in about 4 threads, work it down over it, slide it in, and once you weld it, you just pull it out and the O-ring falls out. You can push the bolt up to where the shank is so that your hole's tighter, and it helps square up the insert. This one has already been welded. O-ring fell out, bolt slides right in.
One of those down. We had the top one lined up.
Huh? Ain't got jack this wall lined up.
Put it down.
Get that one.
And you put it in the wrong side.
Huh? That's my guess. That's my issue.
Huh?
The reason why I did that.
Put that first one in there for a guide.
Yeah. This worked on the other side perfect. Stinking shims in here. Put one on each side. This kind of helps you.
Oh, the back door. Oh, the right, right, right.
Those are getting enough cash. Pull everywhere.
Installed. That's it.
That's it.
Fat loaded straight.
All right, go.
Alright, so we've finished assembling both sides, the struts. You know, there's probably a better way or another way to do it. We did it that way because it was easiest for us. Some of the things that you need to remember is you have a shim on each side of the steering knuckle. Make sure that you get those in there. And the spherical bearing, the protruding part goes down. If you put it up, it'll fit, but you won't be able to adjust your caster and camber very well. You can put it together that way, though. We know it. The bump steer kit was by we got from LMR. The rack we got from LMR. It's a 15-to-1 rack.
5-to-1, obviously.
It can't be 15-to-1. It'd be turning that sucker all day.
Quick ratio rack.
It's a quick ratio rack from LMR.
The spindles and the hubs are new, but the spindles are junk up stuff.
Yeah, we went out to the local. You pulled the spindles, cleaned them up, painted them. The next part will be doing the brakes. We're trying to figure out what brakes we can fit behind the wheel we chose.
That's been our first obstacle.
It's been one of our first obstacles. The next video is probably gonna be a little late coming out because we're having trouble getting the parts for the rear end mounted. So, till then, I like the party. Evan?
Oh, already cut you
Party's
off.
over.
Oh.
Oh, I didn't cut it off. They got it. The party's over.